Is back into it in Chester. Here's El Senior. Yes! Yes!
The center back, Jacob Glesnes.
He's going for it.
Yes! Oh my goal! What a goal!
And that will do it! One of the best comebacks in recent years. 3 unanswered by the Union. And they go into the Gold Cup break, winning it 3-2.
Hello and welcome to the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd. And just like that, the 2022 MLS regular season is over. And it feels like it was just yesterday when I was giving my season predictions to you guys, predicting what the Philadelphia Union are going to do. I remember super cold our first couple games. Then the summertime just goes by, and then I don't even remember September and August. And yeah, here we are, playoff time right around the corner. The Philadelphia Union, we all know, will play the winner of New York Red Bulls or FC Cincinnati, and we'll go over some of the playoff schedule here in a bit. Have a ton of news to get to, and have a ton of stats that you guys know that I love tracking that I want to go over, and I'm not going to bore you guys with all these stats, so I'll give you guys some stats this episode that I was tracking in the game against Toronto that I want to bring up and mention to you guys. But next episode, I'm going to be joined by Skylar Hoffner, who is the social media person for Philly Sports Nation. You guys have heard Skylar on the podcast before, and we're going to go ahead and talk about our 2022 Philadelphia Union Awards, who we would give those awards to. We'll talk about MLS awards, plus our player predictions, and I might even have you guys send us in some listener questions, whatever you guys want us to bring up. Feel free to reach out to either myself or Skylar on Twitter. I'll make, I guess, not a thread, but I'll create a discussion where you guys can give questions on Twitter, or feel free to reach out to freekickpodcast@gmail.com, I think it is, or you can go ahead and leave me a message by going to the website, thefreekick.net. If you guys have any questions for Skylar and I. But, I mean, there's going to be so much to talk about next episode with Skylar. So I don't know how many questions you guys might leave us or how many we'll get to if you guys do leave questions. And, yeah, there is just way too much to talk about for this episode. So I was like, I got to create a second episode. And so that episode with Skylar will come out on Friday. But, yeah, we're going to talk about the MLS commentators, the Apple deal. We're going to go ahead and talk about the MLS playoff schedule, like I said to you guys. I have a couple Ring of Honor questions for you guys. I saw this interesting question on Twitter. I believe it was from Evan. I am not 100% sure if that was Evan who gave the question to people on Twitter, but I believe that's who it was on Twitter. We're talking about this Philadelphia Union Toronto game, break down the goals, 3 stars, and then Blunder of the week. But yeah, I'm super excited to talk about all these topics on today's show. So without further ado, let's just get straight into the news. Man, where to start? Let's go ahead and start with, I guess, the MLS playoffs. I feel like that's going to be the shortest segment out of the 3 topics we're going to talk about in the news segment. So, like I said, New York Red Bulls or FC Cincinnati will be the team that the Philadelphia Union play on October 20th at 8 p.m. That is a Thursday. If you guys have not seen that schedule, posted by MLS, posted by the Union. The Union's first playoff game, the Eastern Conference semifinals, will be on Thursday, October 20th at 8 p.m. And they will play the winner of the New York Red Bulls versus FC Cincinnati, which that game kicks off this Saturday, October 15th at 12 p.m. And then we have the LA Galaxy versus Nashville, the game after New York Red Bulls. That game starts at 3 p.m. on Saturday the 15th. And then on Sunday, October 16th, the day gets kicked off by Austin FC and Real Salt Lake. That game starts at 3 p.m. And then we have CF Montreal versus Orlando City on the 16th of Sunday at 8 p.m. And then on Monday, we have two games as well. We have NYCFC taking on Inter Miami at 7 p.m. on the 17th of Monday, and then FC Dallas versus Minnesota United at 9:30 on Monday, October 17th. And then, like I just said, the 20th of October at 8 p.m., the Union take on New York Red Bulls of Cincinnati. And then after the Union's game, LAFC takes on LA Galaxy or Nashville at 10 p.m. on Thursday. So could potentially get a derby between LA Galaxy and LAFC in the playoffs. But I'm not going to go ahead and give my predictions, like I said to you guys. So if you guys didn't see the playoff schedules, there is some of the playoff schedule for you guys to write down on your calendar. Playoffs are always an interesting time, and I feel like this is when MLS's numbers really start to skyrocket because 34 games, I feel like, in my opinion, isn't a long season, but you have so many other sports that you have the choice to watch in America. But when you have the knockout rounds, playoff time, yeah, I feel like so many people tune in for that. And yeah, that game against New York Red Bulls FC Cincinnati, that's going to be a very interesting game for the Union. I told you guys a couple weeks ago that I don't want to see either one of those teams in the playoffs, or at least not in the first game. And as fate would have it, yeah, we could potentially see Pat Noonan again this season, or we could see New York Red Bulls, who we've seen 2 out of the 3 times in the playoffs the last 3 years. So, you know, we'll see what happens there. And Jim Curtin was asked, coming out of the regular season, you guys get a bye. How do you prepare your team for a knockout competition where, you lose and you go home? And this is what Jim Curtin had to say.
It's brutal, because again, you feel comfortable, and you guys are going to write a lot of nice pieces this week about all the different accolades and records. And if you're not ready for week 1 in this league, every team can beat you. Literally every team in this league can beat us if we're not on our game. So, yeah, as nice as it is, the real season starts now, and we know with our own experience, with the others' experience in the league, the teams that finish 1, 2 doesn't guarantee success in the playoffs, because a team that gets hot at the right time can beat you. The way the things are set up, we get a bye, so we sit around and wait, and you're 100% going to be playing a team that just won a big playoff game. That has already been decided. So they have the momentum coming into your building, which is hard. And then they have nothing to lose because anything they do is a bonus. So we've learned that the hard way. I think we'll take lessons from that. We'll learn from happened in New England last year. It's happened to LAFC. Teams get beat if you're not prepared. So the great thing is, yes, first place, incredible achievement. I think the consistency of this club has been amazing. The ownership has done a great job. Ernst Tanner's done a great job. There's so many people to thank. But we also recognize in 10 days from now, if we're not ready, it's all over. And nothing feels worse than that. So that's what we're guarding against, the letdown.
Yeah, we saw that in 2020 where New England came in and upset the Union when we had the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference and won the Supporters Shield. And yeah, the good thing is, I believe that was 17, 18 days of rest. Now we only have 10 days of rest from our last game against Toronto to this playoff game against New York Red Bulls FC Cincinnati. And yeah, that's not as bad as it could be. Shout out to MLS for getting that schedule better than what it's been in the past. And I don't know about you guys, but Jim Curtin's talked about this the last 2 weeks in his press conference, where he hopes after the season MLS decides to go away with the way that they do playoffs, because it is kind of strange. Not a fan of it, where the brackets, you just play your side of the bracket. It doesn't, 1's not playing 7, 2's not playing 6. Not a fan of how it's laid out, where I believe, in my opinion, the highest seed should always play the worst remaining seed in the playoffs. But, that's, I guess that's a discussion for another day. And playoffs are the way that they are this season, so there's no need to complain about it. But yeah, you don't want to have a letdown, especially with the season you had this year. And I'll play another clip from Jim Curtin kind of talking about that, where they've had such a huge season, breaking all these different records, where, yeah, you don't get remembered unless you win trophies. And I think the league will say, yeah, that's great that you guys did all this throughout the season, but it doesn't matter if you don't win that trophy. And so we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But I told you guys a couple weeks ago I didn't want to play Cincinnati because it's their first time in the playoffs if they win against New York Red Bulls. And Jim Curtin said it. It's 100% guaranteed. Whoever we play, all the momentum's going to be with them because they're coming off of a huge playoff win. Now, we saw what Cincinnati did to the Union in this season at home, 1-1. The Union lose on the road, 3-1. Now, the good thing is, because the Union are the number one seed in the East has to come through Subaru Park. And we know how dominant the Union have been this season at home. But you have a Cincinnati team that's in the playoffs for the very first time. They got to go on the road to New York Red Bulls, where the Red Bulls have not been good at home this season in MLS, where it is very possible that Cincinnati upsets them on the road. And then they come into Subaru Park, where, hey, look, we haven't lost to them at all this season. We're coming in with all the momentum, like Jim Curtin said. And Pat Noonan knows these players, this coaching staff. And you would hope that Jim Curtin doesn't try to overthink it and say, look, let's go away from what didn't work from the first two matchups against Pat Noonan. Let's try to change it around. You hope that Jim Curtin doesn't do that. And if I had a bet, he's not going to do that, because how many times have some of you guys seen in the U.S. Open Cups the Union try to get too cute with their rosters and they completely change up the lineup and then they get blown out by Houston. They lose to Sporting Kansas City. And yeah, you guys still have those conversations to this day on Twitter where, yeah, the Union should never have tinkered with some of the lineups in those U.S. Open Cup games. And you hope that Jim Curtin doesn't do that against Cincinnati. I don't think he would. But, you know, there is always a possibility because the Union have not beat a Pat Noonan Cincinnati team. But regardless, that is the playoffs. Let's go ahead and talk about the next bit of news that I think is going to take the least amount of time to discuss, and then we'll save probably the topic that I was looking forward to the most to talk about. But like I mentioned, Evan, I believe, posted this question on Twitter, and he said, should JP Dellacamera be included into the Ring of Honor? And, you know, we've talked about should Ray Gaddis be in the Ring of Honor. We've seen people say, should El Seno be in it? That's got a potential to happen. I don't think it will. I feel like if you're putting in El Seno in the Ring of Honor, then you're definitely putting Ray Gaddis. But the Ring of Honor, we all know, should be super inclusive, where Ali Bedoya and Andre Blake are the next two players to go into the Ring of Honor. But I've never really thought about a coach or a GM or an announcer into the Ring of Honor. But the more I thought about it, and you guys saw yesterday at the Toronto game, we're recording this podcast on Monday night, and JP banged the drum. They gave him a jersey for his 13 seasons calling Union games. I'm like, wow, JP called the very first game ever. He's been through all the roller coaster of a ride that we call the Philadelphia Union, just like all of you guys. And you see JP, he's called World Cup games, he's called national TV games, and yet he still remained with the Philadelphia Union. And yeah, I know that the Union have honored people with plaques throughout different areas of the stadium. And maybe some of you guys would say, okay, let's go ahead and do the same thing for JP Dellacamera. And they probably will do that. But was it ever decided that the Ring of Honor is just for Philadelphia Union players? I don't think so. And because of that, what's stopping the Union from putting JP Dellacamera in the Ring of Honor? I mean, the guy's a legend. He's had some of the biggest calls in Union history. He's been through the ups and downs, like I said. So I think, you know, if we're not including the Ring of Honor just to be for players, I think personally I would put JP Dellacamera in the Ring of Honor. I mean, how cool would that be to see the second person ever in the Ring of Honor be none other than JP Dellacamera. I mean, he's a U.S. soccer legend in this country, and he deserves to be in the U.S. Soccer Hall of Fame. And I think one day he will definitely be in there. But if you do put JP in the U.S. Soccer Hall of Fame, then he has to go in the Ring of Honor, right? Like, how can you not? So, me personally, I would definitely put JP Dellacamera in the Ring of Honor. But then when I saw this question, I started to think, okay, well, once Ernst Tanner leaves, once Jim Curtin leaves, you saw the duo of those two bring the Union's first ever trophy with the Supporters Shield in 2020. If they had a couple more trophies during their time here with the Union, should they also be included in the Ring of Honor? And if you guys say no, and if you guys said no to JP Dellacamera, then what about, and I know this is so crazy, right? What if the Union took one of the stands in the stadium, one of the sections in the stadium, and named one of them the Ernst Tanner stand or the JP Dellacamera stand or section, whatever you want to call it? Is that too European for you guys? I don't know. Like, we've talked about it in the past where once Ernst Tanner is done, he should definitely get a statue for what he's made the Philadelphia Union into once he joined the organization in August of 2018. And to see instant success, to go into the playoffs in his first full year, to buy all these players that none of us heard about. And 95% of his signings have been hits for the Union. Like, I don't think it's crazy to say Ernst Tanner should get a section in the stadium named after him, or JP Dellacamera or Jim Curtin getting a stand or a section named after him. But if you guys don't want to put either of those guys in the Ring of Honor, if you don't want to name a stand or a section in the stadium in name of them, in honor of them, because it's too European, then for sure they've got to at least get a statue, right? So, yeah, I think that's a really good question by Evan. Should JP Dellacamera be in the Ring of Honor? I think that's a yes. And if you do put him in the Ring of Honor, then surely Ernst Tanner and Jim Curtin have to go in there too if they bring a couple more trophies to the Union, right? I mean, you see it all the time in Europe where they name sections of the club after former managers, players, GMs. So I know this isn't Europe, and some of you guys might be opposed to that, but you got to find ways to honor these guys, and that's where some of you guys might say, yeah, give them a plaque, give them a statue, but don't name a section in the stadium after them. What about a gate? We see so many gates named this company or that company. Why not name it the Ernst Tanner Gate? I mean, that can work, right? So just something for you guys to think about. And the last thing I want to bring up is, so we saw the last couple weeks, the different commentators from different teams started writing their goodbye post, saying how it's been such an honor working for the clubs. And we talked about this a while ago when MLS and Apple TV announced that they were getting rid of the local broadcast at the end of the season, meaning that MLS would have their own commentary teams. No more local broadcasts. MLS announced that they would have 10 to 14 commentary teams with one set of commentators per game. And so instead of going with either 10 or 14, I decided to go in the middle with 12. And the way I came up with my commentary teams, and I kind of feel like this is how MLS is going to do it as well. I broke it into U.S. regions with the East Coast, the Midwest, the South, and the West Coast. And you guys have heard me plenty of times on this podcast just say how grateful I am to have all these different commentators from different teams throughout MLS be willing to come onto this podcast and help me preview games and share their stories with you guys, how they got into broadcasting, how they got into soccer. And I'll forever be grateful for those connections that I made. And so, yeah, part of that is why I feel broken for these people that are going to lose their jobs. And MLS is essentially pitting these teams against each other, saying, okay, well, we're only going to take between 10 to 14 teams, and these are who we believe were the best out of the 28 teams in MLS, which is kind of hard done, but MLS wants to save money, and this is how they're going to do it by potentially halving the number of commentators they have in the league. And so, like I said, I took that number down to 12, broke down the commentary teams by US region with the East Coast, Midwest, South, and West Coast. And these are commentary teams that I believe MLS will select and not necessarily who I would pick. But yeah, certainly some of these people that I'm listing are some of my favorite commentators, some of the best commentators in MLS. And so let's go ahead and just look at the East. And so the East would be responsible for calling Montreal, Toronto, New England, New York City, New York Red Bull, Philly, DC, Charlotte, Orlando, and Miami home games. And so the three commentator teams that I selected that I think MLS will select are one, Denny Higginbottom and JP Dellacamera, two, Andres Cordero and Ray Hudson, who are Inter Miami's commentary team, and then Steve Cangelosi and Shep Messing, who are the commentators for New York Red Bulls. And so with selecting these names, when I broke it down to regions, I basically thought about, okay, MLS is going to look at a couple things here. They're going to look at what commentators at their disposal have called games at the international level, that have called games in different leagues, that have a wide variety of different experiences. And all these commentators I just named you guys have called games for ESPN, have called games for CBS, have called games for Fox, NBC. So they all have great experience. And that's what majority of this list is going to be for you guys. And so that would be my three set of commentators for the East Coast. For the West Coast, I would have Joe Tutino and Kobe Jones, who are the commentators for the LA Galaxy. Then I would have Keith Costigan and Steve Zakawani, who are the commentators for Seattle Sounders. Again, both guys have been terrific for the Sounders. Keith has called games at the international level with Fox Sports. And then three, I would have Jake Zivin and Ross Smith, who are the commentators for Portland Timbers. And then we go ahead and look that they would be responsible for Vancouver, Seattle, Portland, LA Galaxy, LAFC, Real Salt Lake, San Jose, and Colorado. And then for the South, I just have two sets of teams. They would be Glenn Davis and Eddie Robinson, who are the commentators for Houston Dynamo, and then Adrian Healy and Michael Lahoud, who are the commentators for Austin FC, who have been, in my opinion, one of the best this season in MLS. And when you add a person like Adrian Healy, who's called games with ESPN at the national level, great ad there from Austin. And then Michael Lahoud really surprised me too with just his ability to be the color analyst for Austin. So those would be my two sets of commentators in the South, and they would be responsible for Dallas, Austin, Houston, potentially Sporting Kansas City, and St. Louis when they join the league next season. And then finally, the Midwest, you would have Neil Sika, Jordan Angeli, who are the commentators for Columbus Crew. You would have Cal Williams and Kendra D. St. Albin, who are the commentators for Minnesota, Tyler Terrens and Tony Miola, the Chicago Fire commentators, and then Tom Glarder and Kevin McCloskey, who are the commentators for FC Cincinnati. They would be responsible for Minnesota, Chicago, Sporting Kansas City, St. Louis, Columbus, Cincinnati, Nashville, and Atlanta. And so I think, like I said, a lot of those guys and girls have responsibilities calling games at the national level. They've called games in other leagues. And so I think that would be very appealing for MLS. And a lot of these guys have been in MLS for a very, very long time. So they're versatile in knowing the league. And then on the bubble, I have Joel Tolson and Ian Paul Joy from New York City FC, Brad Feldman and Charlie Davies, who are the commentators for New England Revolutions. Now, it does feel strange to me not having Brad Feldman in this list because he's been with MLS for 27 years. And I think there is probably a chance if they don't go with 12 teams, they go with 13 or 14, that Brad and Charlie would definitely be considered for this list. And again, I only put 12 teams. MLS said that they're going to choose between 10 and 14. And so there's a chance that there's two more teams that get added here, or, there's a potential for two of these teams that I listed taken away. And then you have Patrick Egan and Maurice Adu, Atlanta United. Now, I definitely would have put these two in my list, but because Maurice Adu calls games with Fox Sports, where Fox Sports and ESPN are still going to keep their commentators, and then Patrick is a commentator for WWE. He's not always with Atlanta, and so that's why I have them in the bubble. And then I have David James and Brian Dunseth, who are the commentators for RSL, and then Luke Wildman and Steve Caldwell, who are the commentators for Toronto FC. And I included them in this list just because they're pretty versatile in knowing Canadian soccer. They call Montreal games as well as Toronto games with TSN up in Canada. And so those would be my 5 teams on the bubble that I think MLS is probably considering. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think those 12 teams that I gave you guys are probably who MLS are looking at. Now, they could, I guess, catch us all by surprise because as things stand, we don't know exactly what MLS has in store. They haven't come out and said anything. All these commentators after these weekend games, they're in as much limbo as all of us, and that's not cool at all. Where they're working for these specific teams, and they're calling games for this league for MLS, and MLS has been radio silence for all of them. So we'll see what happens, and some of these teams that don't get picked up. Remember, teams are able to simulcast their radio broadcasts with the game as it's going on TV. So if you don't want to listen to a national commentary team, then you can put on your team's local broadcast, which I'm sure we'll probably see Dave Leno and Sebastian Latou still with the Union on the radio broadcast. But at the same time, too, if JP and Danny didn't get picked up by MLS, then for sure Danny and JP would be on the radio with the Union still. But in my opinion, I think these are the teams that MLS are looking at. Again, like I said, this isn't necessarily who I would pick, but this is who I believe MLS will more than likely go with. Yes, some of these commentary teams I do like more than others, but at the end of the day, I think this is probably what makes most sense for MLS. You keep commentators in specific regions. You don't send them all around the United States. And again, MLS is doing this to save money, and so you want to keep commentary teams in regions. You're going to save a lot of money there when you're only sending one team per game, and you just keep these teams in market. So we'll see what happens here. But yeah, I wanted to bring that up again in case people kind of had in the back of their mind that, okay, well, yeah, the season's still going on, but a lot of these people now are without jobs, and sucks seeing some of these great commentators be without jobs. Hopefully they get picked up by MLS. But like I said, it's kind of a bad taste in your mouth where MLS looks at it and they say, all right, well, we choose you 10 teams, you 12 teams, 14 teams as the very best the league had, and everybody else, yeah, you don't quite cut it. So it kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth, which I'm sure it does the same for these commentators that won't get picked. But let's go ahead and move on to the Philadelphia Union versus Toronto FC match. And again, I told you guys had a lot of news to talk about that would probably take up majority of this episode. So we'll probably get through just my thoughts on this Toronto game fairly quickly. But I say that, and yeah, here we go, always spending 25 minutes on my overall thoughts. But yeah, just like that, the Philadelphia Union have broken the goals against record in a 34 game schedule. I mean, to concede 26 goals in 34 games, that is truly incredible. That's the new benchmark for MLS. Will it ever be done again? Who knows? With Sporting Kansas City having the record in a 34-game schedule at 27 goals, the Union have now set it at 26. And to think, if the Union didn't concede 4 goals in Charlotte, if you take away 2 of those goals, I mean, 24 goals in 34 games, if that would have happened, that's unheard of. I mean, to concede 0.76 goals per game, I mean, that's video game-like numbers right there. And this defense will probably go down as one of the greatest ever, and you're kind of lost for words what we witnessed this season. And you look at this team going undefeated at home at Subaru Park. The Union tied the MLS record for the highest home win percentage of .853 in a 34-game schedule. And I asked Jim Curtin about that, just about making Subaru Park a fortress, going undefeated. And he mentioned how, okay, this is great that we have all these accolades, but none of them mean anything if we don't win MLS Cup.
Yeah, the home record's incredible. And again, we'll remember this season forever. I think the fans will remember all the special moments that have happened in this building. But we're also smart enough to know history won't remember us unless we take a big step forward in the playoffs and get to our first MLS Cup and hopefully win it. Ultimately, that's what people really, really remember. There's always outliers in different seasons. But if you don't do it in the big moment, you get forgotten. So I'll remember this team forever and the accomplishments on the field. I think the fans will. I think you guys have done an incredible job covering them and making them feel special. But it's a cruel game, man. The second you feel comfortable, any team can beat you. So you guys have heard me say that quite a bit. So yes, we'll enjoy it. We'll I guess I'll give them 2 days maybe to read the headlines of how good they were, because they were pretty damn good. But then it's right back to work. In an elimination game, anything can happen, so we need to be ready.
And you heard that. That's the second time Jim Curtin said that in his press conference, that, we got to be ready. If we're not ready, then we go home. So I'm sure it probably is in the back of the players' minds, where they had everything wrapped up in 2020, and then New England comes in there and upsets the Union, and their historic 2020 season comes to an end because they got outplayed, outcoached by New England. And you hope that that's not the issue this season for this team. You hope that they can reach MLS Cup. You felt like last season, if COVID didn't happen, that they had a very, very, very real possibility of being in that final. And I would argue that they probably would have been in the final, probably would have been hosting the final if they wouldn't have got COVID, lost to New York City. The team put up a hell of a fight, and that game against New York City will always go down as one of my most memorable games ever in Philadelphia history, just because you look at the players that stepped up, a lot of those guys playing real minutes for the first time in that season. You have a back line of Bizo, Harriel, Colin, and Stuart Finley playing for the very first time, and to see them play as well as they did in a high magnitude game as a Eastern Conference final, that game will always be in my memory, and I'll always have respect for every single player in that game. But you feel like this is the last chance with some of these players in the Union's team. Kai Wagner, could Jose Martinez leave after the season? Could some of the homegrown players get sold in the winter transfer window? And so you feel like this is the last chance that a core group of this team has to win something. And it's crazy when you think about majority of this team has been together for 3-4 years. You only add a couple new pieces this season where they're huge players, and Mikhail Ua and Julian Kranza. You add 2 designated players. And we saw that this season with the trio of Daniel Gazag, Mikhail Ua, and Julian Kranza finishing with 49 goals amongst each other, which is outscoring 16 teams in MLS. Just those 3 players outscored 16 teams. That's more than half of the league. That is unreal. And then I was curious. I wanted to see where this trio of Ua, Gazag, and Kranza ranked amongst some of the other highest scoring trios throughout MLS's history. And that ranks the second most ever for a trio in an MLS season, where you have in 2012 San Jose Earthquakes, they had 50. In 1998, LA Galaxy had 49, which the Union tied this season. Cincinnati also get into the top 5 this season with 46 goals with Brenner, Vasquez, and Acosta. Another reason why I'm scared to play Cincinnati, because that front three has been as good, if not better, than the Union's front three this season. And then in 2014, you had the Galaxy once again with 45 with Keane, Zardes, and Landon Donovan. Great front three there in LA. And so to see the Union tie the 1998 LA Galaxy, I mean, this is just historic. And I told you guys, I don't want to give you guys too many stats, bore you guys with that. Maybe save that for a later episode or something. But yeah, I mean, you see really what DP strikers do to a team. And the Union finally go out and spend and get 2 players where they're pretty much unheard of. Julian Kranza did nothing with Inter Miami. I know. Repeating myself, how many times can I say this on the show? How many times can you guys read this on Twitter? But it is true, right? And I'm sure I'll talk about this again in a later episode where Julian Kranza was doing nothing in Miami. Fans were pissed about this signing. Didn't expect him to do anything. And to finish the season with 14 goals. Mikhail Uar coming into a new league, new team, and finishing the season with 13 goals. I mean, it's unbelievable. And then Daniel Gazdag, 22 goals, 10 assists. And Daniel Gazdag even said after yesterday's press conference that his goal for himself was to have 10 goals, 10 assists. And he scored a lot more goals than he was expecting himself to score. Falls one short of the Golden Boot. And so to see majority of this team, getting back to the point, still together after 3-4 years, that's just unheard of in MLS for a team to stay together for that long. And so you really do feel like this is the last chance that the Union have of winning a trophy. And yeah, that would be wonderful to cap it all off with MLS Cup, because at the end of the day, that's what we all want. That's what we want to witness. That's what the players want, the coaching staff, the owners, Ernst Tanner. And this is probably your last chance of keeping this core group of players together to win MLS Cup. Now, I guess, you could still keep the core group of your team together if you just lose Kai Wagner and you keep everybody else. But, when you have historic seasons like the Union had, you're going to get eyes on you from Europe. And I've said this in the past, and I'll continue to say it. And especially when you look at the front three of Gazdag, Uar, and Carranza. And teams in January are investing in attackers to save them from relegation. And if the Union get blown away from an offer, why would they turn that down? Now, we've seen Ernst Tanner look out for his players and not send his players to places where they're not going to further their careers, that it's just going to be the end for them. Ernst Tanner's looked at Genk and RB Salzburg as stepping stones for Brendan Aronson and Mark McKenzie. And so why wouldn't he do the same for more of these players on this team? I believe he would, especially a player like Kai Wagner. But look, if the Union win MLS Cup, is Kai Wagner the only player that leaves? I don't know. I think you can throw in some homegrown players that potentially leave in January. I think it's very hard to keep Ua, Gazdag, and Carranza together for another season after they scored 49 goals amongst each other. But regardless, whoever the Union do potentially lose, you got to feel confident that Ernst Tanner can replace them, because we saw what he did with Sergio Santos and Kasper Schmeichel, a clear upgrade with Mikel and Julian. So again, we say it all the time, in Ernst we trust. And so whatever happens, we'll see after the season's over. And you just hope that the Union can get it done and win MLS Cup this season. And I know I was all over the place there for you guys, maybe lost you guys, but you go back and look at this Toronto game and look at the goals conceded record that they broke. And a big reason for that is they only conceded 7 goals all season long in the first half. I mean, that is lockdown defense right there. To only concede 7 goals in 34 first halves. I mean, that's a point what? I mean, that is so low. And a big reason why the Union have 72 goals scored this season is because of that lockdown defense in the first half, which the Union go ahead and they score the first goal in 23 out of the 34 matches this season. And when you do that, there's a higher chance for you to hit teams on the counterattack. And there's just this willingness of this team to stick together and fight for every tackle, every ball. And there's a reason why you've only conceded 26 goals, and it's because this team doesn't give up on each other. And I know I might be all over here with numbers and everything, but you guys remember me complaining about how the Union would always concede within the first 15 minutes of games last season. And it was a huge problem, and it eventually got corrected last season. And then you come into this season, and you basically don't concede at all in the first half. It's not an issue. It's no talking point. Nobody's talking about that. What's everybody talking about at the beginning of the season? All the games that the Union have blown. And I was a big talker of that on this podcast, where the Union blew 9 leads this season, but they eventually corrected that. And Jim Curtin has said in pretty much every single press conference that his team hasn't played a complete game, haven't played a perfect game yet this season. And I know a lot of you guys are going to look, well, they won game 6-0, 7-0, 5-0. How isn't that a perfect game? They beat Toronto 4-0. How isn't that a perfect game? And so you do hope that that is partially right, that they save the best game of the season for the MLS Cup final if they do get that far. But yeah, to see the Union correct conceding within the first 15 minutes of the game, where it's not an issue at all this season, to blowing 9 leads this season, not an issue anymore. I mean, they've corrected everything that's been an issue, in my opinion, and they're going into the playoffs in red hot form. And like I said, I mean, scoring 23 out of the 34 first goals on the season. I mean, it's no wonder why this team was in red hot form with goals scored. And again, I know we probably haven't talked too much about Toronto. We'll get to that right here, but there's just so many stats to bring up, and those are just some of them that, like I said, I was tracking in this game against Toronto, and I could do a whole episode of just all these different stats that the Union broke, whether it be team stats or league stats. And some of you guys are probably like, no. Some of you guys are like, yeah, I'd be curious to see every single stat that the Union actually did break. There's a lot, and I've honestly lost track of all these different stats. But yes, we're talking about Toronto here real quick. And when I look at that game, there's just so many players for them that were shut out. They were quiet on the day. You look at Jimenez. He had a big game against the Union when these two teams first met in Toronto, and he was only limited to 30 touches this game, which most of those touches were away from the goal. And that's what you want to do to team strikers. You don't want them to take touches inside the penalty box. You want to force them away from goal. How can a striker be effective if he's not going towards the goal? Jack Elliott sets the tone early on in this match with a huge tackle on Bernadeschi, and that's typically how the Union play. They're second in the league with fouls, 488 fouls, and they're going to rough you up. They're going to make you uncomfortable, get you off your game. And like I said, Jack Elliott set that tone early on with a huge challenge. You had Leon Flock and Jose Martinez just all game long, marking Bernadeschi tightly, not giving him much to work with. And, I think fans really do appreciate that hard defensive work. You have that goal line clearance from Bizo, which I think goes unnoticed from a game like this, a 4-0 game. And here's a player whose awareness came into question a lot last season and at the beginning of the season against Minnesota. And that's a huge heads-up play from Bizo, who's been playing unreal the second half of the season. When you look, I guess it's really no surprise with the World Cup coming up. He wants to start for Cameroon. He'll probably be in the 26 for Cameroon, but that's not good enough for him. He wants to be the starting right back. And with the season he's had with the Union in the second half, why wouldn't he be the starting right back for Cameroon? I know the two friendlies that they had, Bizo didn't play in either one of them, and Jim Curtin said last week that he was a little bit disappointed that he didn't get playing time, especially with as far as he traveled. But if Bizo has a great playoff series, how can that go unnoticed by Cameroon? You look at Matt Real stepping in for Kai Wagner, who was suspended this game. Do you guys feel that, okay, if Kai sold in the winter, do you guys feel confident with Matt Real as your starting left back? Because me personally, this game against Toronto, I get it. Toronto is one of the worst teams in MLS, but that game really reminded me of his performance against LAFC in 2020, where he was great defensively and great offensively. Where that game against LAFC, Carlos Vela was going at Matt a lot in 1v1 situations, and Matt held his own in that game. Where you look, Bernadeschi, Marshall Rudy are going at Matt Real, and he's doing a good job shutting these guys out. You look at Bernadeschi, he's floating all around the top of the 18 because Matt Real, Liam Flock are shutting him out. Jose Martinez is shutting him out. Jack Elliott's shutting him out. And so then he wants to just switch where he's at on the field. But the Union just do such a good job this game against Toronto, just limiting their whole team. McNaughton gets exposed multiple times by Mikael Uwers, runs in behind the defense. I mean, just a great performance against Toronto. And Jim still doesn't want to admit that it's a complete game, perfect game from the Union. But yeah, there's a lot to like against Toronto. And, you know, if Jim is to be believed, hopefully that best game is to come in MLS Cup. But real quick, let's go ahead and talk about the 3 stars. Number 1, Daniel Gazdag, 3 goals, 1 assist, 62 touches. And I don't know if you guys track stats as much as I do, but a big problem for the Union in the past, whether that be Brendan Aronson, Jamiro Montero, Anthony Fontana, is they weren't getting their 10s on the ball enough. And majority of the season, Daniel Gazag's getting 35 touches plus per game, which is what you want from your 10, your creator. Now, I know Daniel Gazdag isn't your typical number 10. I mean, there really isn't your typical number 10 anymore in soccer. I mean, the only one I can think of in MLS is Carlos Heel, Lucas Zelarayan, maybe Reynoso, but you don't have your typical playmaking 10 anymore. When teams look for a 10, they look for a goal scorer. And 2, a lot of teams in soccer don't even use 10s like they used to 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago. And so, I mean, not to go off on a tangent here, but when teams compare, the best Union players ever, or these were the best players ever in soccer, it's like, how can you compare these different generations when the game's changed so much throughout history? Maybe that could be another podcast here for another time. Definitely not here. But number 2 on the day for my star, Jack Elliott, 3 out of 4 tackles won, 1 interception, 11 ball recoveries, 4 out of 5 ground duels won. And yeah, I mean, you feel bad for Jack, where he's not included into the best defenders in MLS because teams are limited to 2 per team. Where, of course, I'm going to give it to Kai Wagner because he has 15 assists on the season. You had Jacob Glesnes, who was an all-star, played every single minute this season for the Union. So it made sense why you included Jacob Glesnes too. But man, Jack Elliott's been so good this season. Every single year. Underappreciated. And for me, the second star won the night against Toronto. And number 3, Mikael Uwa, 1 goal. And what doesn't show up on the stats is there's runs in behind the defense, just spreading the field. Something that Sergio Santos did a lot of, but the only thing Sergio didn't do was score goals. But these same runs that Sergio was making, Mikael Uwa is doing the same runs. But he has a better connection with Julian Kranz and Daniel Gazdag than what Kasper Shabelko or Sergio Santos had with Daniel Gazdag. And the problem that we had with Sergio or Kasper, they were just inconsistent with scoring. Mikael Uwa is our best finisher at the club. And we saw it again on display against Toronto. Gets 1 chance, 1 goal. And so those are my 3 stars on the night. Now let's go ahead and quickly break down all 4 goals in this match, which we all know Daniel Gazdag gets the hat trick. And number one on the day is going to come in the 4th minute. So Jose Martinez is going to have this ball at the halfway line. He's going to go ahead and pass the ball out left to Matt Real. Matt Real has a ton of space on the left side to work with. And you have the 3 center backs for Toronto doing a good job keeping Mikael Uhre and Julian Kranza isolated. And you are going to have Liam Flock make a run in behind the right back for Toronto. And that's because the right back has to focus on Matt Real because the midfielders and Bernadeschi aren't pushing the ball. They're not wanting to play defense. And so because of that, Liam Flock's able to make this run in behind the right back, or right wing back, I guess, is technically what Toronto were playing with. Liam Flock had a fantastic back heel pass to Matt Real, and as soon as Matt Real passes the ball to Liam Flock, he's just continuing his run up the line. Matt Real is going to go ahead and collect the ball here, one-time cross it into the box. Great cross. And people wonder, okay, can we get the same offensive production from Matt Real as we got from Kai Wagner? I know it's only one game, but we've seen glimpses of what Matt Real can offer in the past. And again, it's one game, and some of you guys might say, hey, if we lose Kai, let's bring in another left back because you guys don't feel confident in Matt Real. But every time he's been called upon this season, he's impressed. And so Matt Real is going to send in this cross into the box. He gets cleared away from Toronto. Not a great clearance at all. And Daniel Gosling is going to go ahead and hit this on the volley. But what's interesting is, I talked about it last week in my goal breakdowns where some of those goals, the Union just didn't look interested, didn't shut down Charlotte at all. They were just walking to the ball. And that's exactly what you have here early on in this game from Toronto. Bernadeschi doesn't want to play defense. The midfielders, the forwards, aren't pressuring the ball when Jose has it at the top of the halfway line. Matt Real's wide open on the left side of the field. And because of that, he's able to take his time. Liam Flock's able to make that run in behind the right wing back. The center back has to come out of position to get Leon, and it's a great ball in from Matt Real. Even better pass from Liam Flock, and great awareness from Matt Real to continue his run. And yeah, just terrible clearance from Toronto, and you get an early goal from the Union, courtesy of Daniel Gosling. The second goal comes via Mikael Uhre, assisted by Daniel Gosling, where Andre Blake's going to go ahead and play this ball out of the back to Jose Martinez, who is, throughout the season, a big creator, going to collect this ball, playing these long balls out of the back, just like we see Jack Elliott and Jacob Glesnes. Jose Martinez is going to go ahead and play this ball short to Matt Real. Matt Real is going to play it right back to Jose Martinez, and Jose Martinez gets pressured from Toronto, and he's fortunate not to have turned the ball over. I know we've seen moments where he collects the ball in bad positions and he takes too many touches, tries to dribble his way out of it. This time, the fake pass gets him out of it, plays the ball up the line, gets deflected. And this is great awareness here from Liam Flock to keep the ball in play, to not give up on it. Sees Daniel Gosling's wide open in the middle of the field because 2 Toronto players swarm Liam Flock. And again, this is just great awareness from this team. You can tell that they're used to playing with each other, where Liam Flock doesn't even look. He just knows where Daniel Gosling is going to be. He sees there's a whole bunch of space in the middle of the park, passes it to Daniel Gosling. Gosling is going to go ahead and take one touch, sees Mikael Uhre making one of his many runs in behind the Toronto defense. Great ball over the top from Mikael Uhre. What really sets up this play is the first touch from Mikael Uhre. He's not going to take a touch until he gets right at the edge of the 18-yard box. That touch takes him towards goal. McNulty catches up, and Mikael Uhre just slows down the play here, takes McNulty out of the play, knows that he has the corner, and easy finish from Mikael Uhre. Like I said, our most clinical finisher on the season. Number 3 goal, courtesy of a Daniel Gosling penalty kick. Now this comes from a corner kick from the Union. Jack McGlynn is going to go ahead and send in the ball here. Again, Kai Wagner suspended. Jack McGlynn takes the free kicks. The ball finds its way to Mikael Uhre. nobody on Toronto is able to get ahead on this. And we saw a lot this season. The Union would go near post on the corner kicks to have a flick on from Ali Bedoya. And then the Union would go far post, have Jacob Glesnes play the ball back in. And now we're seeing the Union actually have people make runs in from the top of the 18-yard box like Mikel Uwar did. And this time, it's not a goal because of a header. It's a goal because of a penalty. The ball hits the defender on his hand. He's trying to block the shot. And honestly, watching the replay of this, it kind of looks like the ball takes a deflection off of the defender's knee and then onto his hand. But the referees say it hits his hand first. I guess they had a clearer angle, cleaner screen than what we were able to see in the press box, what I'm able to see here on my screen. And the Union get a penalty kick. Daniel Gazdag puts it away. And the fourth goal in the game, courtesy of Daniel Gazdag, who gets his hat trick. And just like the first goal, Toronto don't shut down the Union. They're too slow to the ball. There's a quick throw in here from the Union, from Matt Real. I'm going to go ahead and find Daniel Gazdag, who takes a great touch. Finally swarmed by one Toronto player. He sees that, and he has a give and go with Leon Flock here. Matt Real eventually gets the ball back, and Daniel Gazlag's just going to do what he does throughout the season, just go past players, combine well with Julian Carranza with a 1-2 as Daniel Gazdag takes this throw basically at the halfway line, and he just creeps himself forward and gets involved in the plays, a lot of 1-2s. And that's when Daniel Gazlag's been at his best with Mikel Uwar, with Julian Carranza, those 1-2 passes between the front three. And this comes courtesy of Toronto not shutting down the play, where the Union take a quick throw in. And, this is all on Toronto for just not being ready to play. Like the first minute, like I said, they gave up the goal in the fourth minute because they are too slow to the ball. And then you have the fourth goal, they're too slow to shut down the throw-in. And so that is my goal breakdowns. And we're going to go ahead and talk about Blunder of the Week real quick. If you guys have not seen this, and this really did go unnoticed. The announcement came out of nowhere. Nobody was aware of this that I saw until it was announced by MLS. MLS announced that they suspended Atlanta United Santiago Sosa for 3 matches because he used a homophobic slur against New England Revolution last week. And so, yes, that suspension is going to go into effect next season. He missed the last game of the season. He's going to have to go to some LGBTQ plus allyship training through Athlete Alley. And it's just been just an announcement that came out of nowhere when people saw the Atlanta beat reporters reporting this news. People were shocked. And you look at the terrible season Atlanta's had with injuries. You have the locker room drama with Josef Martinez and the coaching staff. Josef Martinez isn't getting starts anymore at Atlanta because him and the coaching staff can't get along. And part of me feels like that whole Josef Martinez situation is, when the headache starts to outweigh the production, it's time to move on from that player. And Josef Martinez only had 9 goals this season. Now, I believe he was the leading goal scorer for Atlanta United this season. If not, he was definitely in the top 3. And so, I mean, he was productive in a sense where he was in the top 3 of their leading goal scorers, but it isn't a typical Josef season where we've seen him score 20-plus goals in the past. And granted, he's not the same player he was once he had that injury to his ACL. But at the same time, one of the best players, a proven goal scorer, and you just add all the drama that he's provided that team this season, and now you add this drama with Santiago Sosa. Remember, you had that drama with the signing of Thiago Almeida, where he was accused of sexual assault in Argentina, and Atlanta United still went ahead with the signing. Nothing ever came of the allegations, and that kind of got shushed up. And I feel like this whole situation with Santiago Sosa is going to be brushed aside too. But again, like I said, just people were caught by surprise. This all came out of nowhere, and so that is going to be my blunder of the week. And the last thing I will let you guys know, again, super excited to be a part of the podcast row at the 2023 United Soccer's Coaches Convention in Philadelphia from January 11th to the 15th. And I hope to see some of you guys there. You know, the convention is the ultimate event for soccer coaches, administrators, and fans of the beautiful game. Ignite your passion through captivating presentations, on-field demonstrations, exhibits, and networking events for coaches at the youth, high school, coach, and pro levels. You know, whether you guys are attending alone or bringing a whole coaching staff or bringing some of your friends, there is no better place for soccer coaches, soccer fans to learn, network, and experience the latest trends in soccer education. Register now for the lowest possible price. Visit www.unitedsoccercoachesconvention.org to register today. And I can't wait to see some of you guys there in Philadelphia. Super excited to be invited to this convention. And again, it's going to be a great time. And I'm really looking forward to this happening in January. And as always, I'll leave a link in the show description if you guys want to sign up today. Would love to see some of you guys there. But if you guys aren't following the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, follow @FreeKickPod, wherever you get your guys' podcasts of The Free Kick. And check out the website, thefreekick.net. And again, like I said at the beginning of the show, Skylar Hoffner is going to be joining the show on Friday as we talk Union Awards, MLS Awards, MLS Playoffs, and whatever else you guys decide to ask us. But until then, my name is Todd, and this is the Free Kick Podcast.